All right, welcome. It is Monday, the first Monday of April. It is April 4th, 2022. Another episode of AKP Sports Talk. It is your favorite two. Ari over there, Korea up here. It's a nice sunny day up here, kind of windy. Ari, how you doing? It's the first Monday of April. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. As we said last week, March really flew by. I'm already into April. Um, a lot of fun sports action to look forward to this month that we'll get into in today's episode.
Yeah, but I mean, we already had some action just to start off the pretty much the first of the month. Saturday we had the Final Four. First game that happened was between Kansas and Villanova. We already knew Kansas was going to be pretty much outpowering Villanova. Villanova was already down. Justin Moore with that Achilles injury that he sustained in the Elite Eight matchup against Houston, and it just looked like Villanova couldn't really have that magical run that they what they were hoping for this tournament. I mean, obviously they had a Final Four appearance. Also, shout out Colin Gillespie. He's a great shooter. Obviously, great all around player for Villanova. He's been there. He's been there since their 2000, I believe, 18 title. So he's been a thoroughbred for this program. But first game, Kansas just we already talked about it. Abaji, Martin, Brown, all those guys just seemed have a good shooting day. Once they get hot, I mean, it was already 10-2 at the beginning. I already knew as soon as that score
10, 10
was,
0.
yeah,
10
it
0.
was 10-0. Pretty much to start the game, and you kind of knew from then that it was just going to be a whole Kansas domination game. So Kansas now moves to tonight's championship game. Ari, what did you like out of that game? What did you notice from Kansas that can help them tonight against the other opponent, which we'll get into in a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned their shooting. Agabaji had like 4 threes early. He just couldn't miss. McCormick dominated Villanova down low. And those two are all I need. Like, if you look at the benches for both teams, like both of them were super shallow on the bench. Remy Martin was the only guy who played more than 10 minutes off the bench for Kansas, and he only had 3 points. And then I think it was Antoine for Villanova played 19 minutes, and he was the only one who had 3 points. So it was really both teams starting lineups played most of the game. Like for Villanova, Gillespie and Caleb Daniels both played 39 of the 40 minutes. And then, yeah, both teams had 9 of the 10 starters on the two teams combined played at least 30 minutes. So it was a game dominated by the starters. Watching the first half, Villanova was only down by 11 at half, but watching, I thought they were down by like 15 to 20. And in the second half, both teams kind of traded blows shot for shot. It seemed like every time Villanova kind of cut it to like 5-7, Kansas would go on a little bit run of their own to get it back into double figures. You mentioned Justin Moore. Villanova was definitely missing his scoring. I think he was their second leading scorer during the season. So they were definitely missing him early. But, I mean, Kansas just couldn't miss early. And in the second half, they cooled down a tad bit. But they still finished 13-24 from three, which is hard to beat, and 53% overall. And so, I mean, really just McCormick and Agabaji alone had 46 together. And so that was all they really needed to beat Villanova. They were already shallow as it is, and losing more made them even more shallow. But yeah, credit to Kansas. Colin Gillespie had a fantastic career that seemed like it lasted forever with Villanova. But you can see it really hit him as he walked off the court for the last time. That was it. And, a lot of emotion on both teams, but I was hoping it could have been a bit of a closer game like the other game was, but Kansas got hot early, and that's what we've seen kind of all season. Is some games they get hot, some games are not as hot, and this game they just couldn't miss early.
Yeah, you mentioned Kansas. It was just they were just shooting the ball like they've been doing pretty much throughout the season. Just very consistent shooting from McCormick down low, then Agbaji. I mean, obviously they didn't even go to their bench that much just because of how just controlled the game was by Kansas. So you mentioned it, Kansas just doing what they've been doing. I was hoping for a closer game as well. Kind of wanted to see, Villanova kind of make it interesting. Even though they've been down so many players due to injury, the latest one being Justin Moore. So, but obviously you mentioned the whole Colin Gillespie moment. That was a heartbreaking moment. Just heartfelt. Heart touching. All that stuff. Very emotional scene when he walked off the court for the final time. Hell of a run for Colin Gillespie at Villanova. He's going to be definitely going to the NBA someday. Great shooter. But for Kansas, yeah, you just mentioned when they go 13 to 24 shooting from three, it's like you can't miss. It's just lights out. You're just shooting the lights out. So that's pretty much why Kansas has made it this far as they enter the game tonight. But the other side of the bracket was the game everyone was really looking forward to. The first time these two teams have ever matched up in the NCAA tournament, which is a little bit of a shock to a lot of people that these two teams had never met, knowing all the accolades and titles between these two programs. The 8 seed, the UNC, and the 2 seed Duke. Obviously, the big storyline coming into this game was Coach K's, final run as the head coach of Duke. Could he get to the championship one more time? Beating the team. Obviously, that is not that far in terms of their campus is back in North Carolina, but also just the history between these two programs. Obviously, the last time these two teams played was Coach K's final game in Cameron Indoor, where Coach K eventually did lose to the same UNC team the first time to kind of give them some doubt whether or not they were legitimate. But then here we are. It was kind of a miracle route to get here, but UNC and Duke for the first time met up in the NCAA tournament on Saturday, and it was a very back and forth game. Obviously, just UNC was playing their hearts out. Baycott, he even got injured, but he just was not gonna quit. It just Paolo Banchero, shout out to him, Seattle product. He tried his hardest. He did all he could do, but in the end, the UNC Tar Heels did get the 81-77 victory over Duke and advanced to tonight's championship game against Kansas. And I didn't get to watch this much of that game, unfortunately. But from what I just saw, it was just very back and forth. Coming down the stretch, just great ball play by both teams. Obviously, Baycott is the one guy that you got to try and stop if you're Duke. And if he's having a good day, then it's going to be trouble. Obviously, they couldn't do it again. All right, what are your thoughts? First off, for Duke, were you kind of surprised to see Duke lose to the same team again? And what does this mean for Coach K's legacy? And then for UNC, what an incredible run, 8 seed, now in the championship. Are they going to complete the – do you think they can have the talent to complete the Cinderella run tonight?
Yeah, I mean, the game definitely lived up to the hype coming down to, the last minutes. Baycott, a monster on the glass, 21 rebounds. You mentioned his injury, and I want to say the game was tied with like 5 minutes left at that point, and you figure, this might be a turning point for Duke to kind of take over the last few minutes. But then like a minute later, he comes back out. He goes back to the locker room and comes back like a minute later. You knew it had to – it looked like I was watching on my phone because I was not home either, but I want to say he like twisted his ankle from what I could tell on my phone, and so you knew it had to be really bad if he wasn't going to return, and so I wasn't like shocked to see him return, and he didn't seem to be too injured when he came back in. So whatever they did, for the minute in the back seemed to help. But yeah, I mean, Duke had a 3-point lead at half. It was pretty much the entire way. It was close. I want to say the biggest lead was like maybe 7 or 8, maybe 9 points in that range. So it was the game never got away too much from either team, and it came down to the last minute. Caleb Love with 28 points led the way for UNC scoring-wise. The duo of him and Baycott definitely made the huge difference. And then Duke only shot 5 of 22 from 3, which was probably their biggest downfall. Roach 0 for 5. Keels off the bench had 19. That was big for them. And then you mentioned Banchero. He had the 20 points, 10 rebounds, so he was super solid. But guys who stepped up in previous games like AJ Griffin, and then Wendell Moore. Neither of those guys could really step up for Duke late, and so it just wasn't quite enough. It seemed like UNC was a little bit more balanced. Manic had some big shots late as well. Davis had some shots, so they had three guys with at least 14, and then it was really Banchero and Keels had 2019. That was about it for Duke scoring wise. So, but again, like the Kansas Villanova game, UNC was super shallow. They only had three guys off the bench, and they combined for 12 minutes. But then Duke had Keels off the bench for 29, so they were a little bit deeper. But yeah, I mean, it came down to Baycott, Davis, and Love. That trio was really the difference at the end, and it should be a good one tonight.
Yeah, you mentioned that back and forth game. Obviously, you mentioned just the inability of Duke to just stop Baycott on the glass. He collecting 20 plus boards. Great day for him on the glass. You mentioned those guys for Duke, like AJ Griffin and Wendell Moore, who have proven to be solid pieces to Banchero. They didn't show up, so obviously you mentioned 5-22 shooting. That's definitely going to be a reason as to why you lose a basketball game right there. And then you look at UNC and you just see, pieces that are flowing together at the right time. A lot of people were kind of speculative about this UNC team just because, they've had bad losses to like Pitt in conference play. And then they get their first, real good win, against like a Duke team. And then they lose to VTech in the ACC tournament, and everyone's still questioning. But UNC, obviously well balanced team. We see Caleb Love. When Caleb Love and Baycott and Davis are all three playing together really well, UNC is looking like one of the best teams in the country right now. So shout out to obviously Coach K. We've known his legacy. He's taken that Duke team to multiple NCAA Final Fours, championship appearances, ACC tournament. That man has coached the 2008 Dream Team for United States basketball. So Coach K, obviously, kind of a sour note to end his career, obviously, but what a run for that man. And it's just something that you just can't teach. So shout out to the Duke program over there. But sets up for tonight's very intriguing championship matchup between the number 1 seed Kansas out of the Midwest region, and then out of the East region we have the number 8 seed UNC Tar Heels. A lot of people are calling this the Roy Williams battle because obviously Roy Williams, before he became the coach at UNC, he did coach Kansas. So this is kind of like a little bit of an interesting battle. Two programs that Roy Williams has impacted very beneficially. This is kind of an interesting one. Obviously, UNC, the Cinderella story. They, just are offensive, prolific machines right now. They've put up at least 80 points in some, like obviously, or still just good shooting days against formidable opponents. They scored 93 against a good Baylor team that's good defensively. They put up 93 against Marquette. They put up good numbers against UNC and then St. Peter's, and then they beat the team that is up the street from them, Duke, to get to this point. And then Kansas, we talked about their offensive production as well with Agbaji and Brown and McCormick and then Remy Martin off the bench. And it just seemed like this team can't be stopped. So here's the big question: who you got tonight between these two pretty much blue bloods in college basketball, between number 1 Kansas and number 8 UNC?
Yeah, this is super tough because my heart wants to go with Kansas, but my what is that? Is that heart and mind? Is that the
I think so.
Part of me wants to go with Kansas with the run offensively that they're on, but then UNC seems to have also they both have momentum making it this far, but part of me wants to give UNC the momentum beating, Baylor and Duke along the way as kind of like the tougher run. They've kind of been through it. And I think Agbaji, I think it comes down to Kansas shooting. Like if Agbaji, he was 6 or 7 in the Final Four, if he shoots like that, I think it's going to be tough to beat Kansas. And then we mentioned Remy Martin a couple of times. He has had a couple big games, a couple not so big games. I think he'll be another big difference maker. Baycott versus McCormick down low should be a fun battle. I assume Baycott should be fully healthy for this game. Both teams, kind of have 3 to 4 guys that they can rely on, not just really one guy, which is what it takes to make it this far. But in the end, I'm leaning towards Kansas. Kansas is a 4-point favorite, and I think it could be close enough where Kansas could win, but UNC can still cover that 4 points. I hope it comes down to the final minutes, because that's kind of what we're all watching for. Unless you're a Kansas or UNC fan, you want them to crush them. But as a neutral fan, I hope it comes down to the final minutes, which I think there's a good chance it will. But I'm leaning Kansas. What about you?
This was a tough one for me too. Obviously, we mentioned the shooting ability with Kansas. They've had Agabaji, they have Brown, they have Martin, they have McCormick. They have so many. They have pretty much a healthy rotation enough where they can shoot the lights out. But you mentioned it. It's all about Kansas shooting tonight. If Kansas does not shoot well, this opens the door really up for UNC. With Caleb Love and Davis and Baycott and Brady Manick, all those guys who are pretty deep and play well together and who are really, really hot right now. This is a tough one for me. I want to say Kansas as well. My mind is telling me go with Kansas just because of, how good of a shooting team they are and, just what I've seen throughout their route, not obviously not as a harder route to the championship game than UNC, but still the route that they got here to, was pretty impressive. Obviously, their hardest game was probably that Creighton game. Even talk about that Miami game when they were down at halftime by their biggest deficit, came back and won that game in the second half fairly handily. So my mind is telling me Kansas, but my mind had Gonzaga, Arizona, Kentucky, and Iowa in the Final Four. So forget my mind. I'm going with my heart tonight. I'm going with UNC. I want to see, a great story. Obviously, Hubert Davis, first-year head coach. African-American head coach, obviously got to support. So I love to see Kansas to win it well. I want to see Remy Martin, succeed as a Pac-12 member, but I got to root for UNC. I love the story. I love Brady Manick's TikToks. I love what they're doing down there in UNC. So I'm going to go with – I think it's going to be a very close shooting game as well. I'm hoping for a buzzer beater because we haven't had a single one this March Madness, which is making me a little upset. But
give us another one of those Chris Jenkins endings with that type of hopefully.
Exactly. I'm seeing it right now. Baycott hands it off to Love for the 3-game win. I'm calling it right. I'm just maybe hopefully. But yeah, I think UNC could actually pull it out today. I mean, it all just depends on how Kansas is shooting, and I think this may be their toughest opponent in the tournament so far, if you really think about it. I mean, obviously first round opponent Texas Southern, they blew them out early, and obviously Creighton was fully healthy. I think Creighton could have maybe potentially won that game if they had their big man in there, and then they had to play a Providence team that they'll outshoot any day, and then they had to play, I mean, obviously they were town tough against Miami, but the second half they just shot the ball better, and then they played an injured Villanova team, so they haven't really had a really tough opponent other than Miami and Creighton. So I think UNC is going to be that real, tough opponent who is really good right now and can actually, stop them and, can actually go shot for shot for them. So, and I think UNC is going to get the edge here. I think it's going to be a close game, but I have UNC pulling out the win and bringing a national championship back to North Carolina.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking of with my mind going to Kansas, my heart going to UNC. I'm going Kansas, you're going UNC, but yeah, it should be a good one.
Yeah, definitely. We will that national championship starts in about a couple hours. We will recap with that one on Wednesday in the next episode. But the moment you guys have been waiting for, we talked about it last week. It is time for baseball. Opening day is only 3 days away. We're getting to it. We've finally been waiting for this.
Julio.
Obviously, this. Yes, that's the big one for us. Julio Rodriguez, Big J Rod made the Mariners. Oh, yeah, we definitely will get to that later. Obviously, J-Rod, big man, made the Mariners Day starting roster. That was something we all Mariner fans were kind of clamoring for as he's just been raking in spring training, pretty much all spring training. Number 3 prospect overall in MLB's top prospect. So something really big to see. We'll get into that when we get to the AL West. But first, we're going to get into the AL East here for our division by division predictions. But honestly, I got to tell you, Ari, this for me is one of the hardest divisions, I gotta say, because you can definitely make an argument that there are 4 teams in this division that can make that can make the wild card or the playoffs and take away the rest of the wild card spots. And it's really hard for me, but we're gonna start from the bottom up to kind of give our reveal. So obviously, for me, number 5, I definitely do have the Orioles. I do like what they're doing though with Adley Rutschman. Kind of building for the future. I think Adley could eventually be an AL Rookie of the Year as well. But you mentioned there's also Cedric Mullins out there. He had all-star outfielder for the Baltimore Orioles. Trey Mancini, big name out there in Baltimore. I think, the program is going through a little bit of a rebuild right now. They still have John Means, obviously a great year coming off of his no-hitter against the Mariners. But yeah, we're not going to get into that. But I do believe the Orioles are probably going to be, sitting very comfortably at the bottom of the AL East. I have them, maybe about 50 to 60 wins on the year, actually 60 to 70. They're just in a rebuild right now. Obviously, they have a bright future with Adley and Cedric, and obviously having some good old veteranship with Trey Mancini, and having an ace in John Means. I think the pieces are starting to form itself in Baltimore. It's just kind of more about execution. So I think Baltimore, they're about a 60 to 70 win. I think they can get, maybe lower end to 60. I think maybe about 64 to 65 wins for that program this upcoming season.
Okay, so I'll give the over-under for each team, and we'll kind of give a prediction for over-under. So 62.5, according to DraftKings, is the line. So you're going slightly over? Is that what you're going with?
Yeah, I'll give it. Why not? I mean, they got John Means, obviously.
They had 52 wins last year.
Yeah, I think they can get it done. Obviously, they're going to have Adley Rutschman, big name, obviously out of the Baltimore Orioles organization. Obviously, I kind of confused about what they're doing with Cedric Mullins because they were talking about trading him, but obviously, I guess those rumors went away. So I guess they're really investing in that center field position along with, Trey Mancini, veteran, and then they have an ace. I think they can get about 64 to 65 wins on the season, but, not. But yeah, I'll give them 63. Let's go 60, right above the average.
Okay, yeah, so you mentioned Mullins hit 291 last year, 30 home runs, 30 stolen bases, so he had a 30-30. The power and the speed is announced earlier this offseason, I think it was, that he was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 2020, and so he lost a lot of weight from that, and so it's really cool to see him bounce back from that, and turn into an all-star this past year. Another player I'm kind of keeping an eye on is Ryan Mountcastle. He had 33 home runs this past year. But what's kind of gone a little bit under the radar is the Orioles ballpark. They moved the wall in the left field back like a decent amount, so that could lower the home runs in that ballpark a little bit with that move. And so guys like Mountcastle and Mancini, the power hitters, could see potentially a step back in home runs. A slight step back, probably not significant, but at least a slight step back in that regard, and hitting to that part of the ballpark. Again, DraftKings has their over-under at 62.5. They had 52 last year, so that's quite the jump up for the over-under. But I'm with you. I'm going to go slightly over in that 63 to 65 range.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with you. Sorry, I'm looking around like
Very good.
Yeah, we're having some very high wins up here, but yeah, I'd say about the same as well. I forgot to mention Ryan Mountcastle. Excuse me, can never get his name. Their power hitter out of Baltimore. But you mentioned moving that left field wall back a little bit. That could really be a big effect. For those power hitters in Camden Yards, and especially they already have that right field big wall up there in Camden Yards, so it's not going to be getting any easier for Baltimore. But now we're going to move up to the 4. This one's kind of intriguing for me. This one's hard because I think this is a hot take for me. You know what, Ari? Look, you go first. Who do you have right now at 4th place in the AL East?
I didn't really do an order when I was just kind of going through each team.
We can just go through each team. How about we just go through Boston? Let's go with Boston for me. Obviously one of the big offseason signings for them was Trevor Story. Let's
let's just say we'll go through each team in the division, and then after we go through each team, then we'll kind of give an order after we go through each team. We'll do that.
That sounds perfect to me. So where's like Trevor Story. So obviously one of the big offseason acquisitions for Boston, getting Trevor Story, moving him to second base. That infield is pretty stacked. I mean, they have Devers at third with Bogarts at short, and then you have Story at second, and then they have Dalbec at first. So pretty solid infield for Boston. One of the bigger questions was Chris Sale, and obviously he's been injured and is still injured. He's going to miss some of the beginning of the season, so they don't have their ace. But they still have Eovaldi and a pretty solid rotation. So Boston is obviously going to be contender in this division. One of the bigger offseason losses for them was definitely Kyle Schwarber. They had him for that playoff run against the Yankees in the wild card. Before they had lost, I believe, in the ALDS right after they went in the wild card. So I definitely would say it's been an improvement offseason for the Boston Red Sox, but I mean, it's a stacked division. It's not easy. So, but I do like what they're doing. Obviously, having one of the better infields. Obviously, you mentioned Devers. Pretty much, he's been known as like an AL MVP dark horse potentially. Maybe he can get the batting champion. He can be a batting champion. And then you have Xander Bogaerts and Trevor Story. So that pretty much just rounds out your middle infield, and you have that hot corner pretty much taken up. I like what Boston's doing, but it's not going to be easy compared to what the other three teams are doing in this division. So, I think they can get obviously definitely more than 80 to 90 wins. I think they're about maybe an 87, 88 win team for me. I don't really see them doing. I mean, obviously, it's going to be hard, especially in a division like this. I definitely see this team probably winning higher 80 wins for the season. But I think it's mostly going to be affecting the beginning of the season with no Chris Sale, and I think they're going to try and come back, but just be a little bit short.
So the over/under according to DraftKings is 85.5. So you're right there again. So you're going slightly over.
I guess I'm going slightly over again. It's crazy.
Yeah, so one of the players I'm kind of looking at with Boston is Bobby Dahlbeck, former U of A player in college. He hit 25 home runs in his first full season last year, 240. He's going to be their full-time first baseman. So I'm kind of looking to see how he takes a step forward heading into his second full season with Boston. And then JD Martinez, I've kind of always been a fan of him dating back to with the Tigers. Originally, it seemed like he might opt out of his deal and head somewhere else, but he ended up staying in Boston. So he'll kind of, I think, mix into the outfield and DH spot for them. He hit 286 last year, and then AL leading 42 doubles along with 28 home runs. So he has that kind of mix of power and still a good average that I always kind of like with players. So yeah, again, 85.5 is their over/under. You mentioned like 4 teams can legitimately win this division, so in a way you could kind of say that maybe they're gonna beat each other up so much to where maybe they don't have as good a record as they might seem on paper. I'm leaning towards slightly over as well with Boston, but it's definitely they had 92 wins last year. In the regular season, it's definitely going to be tough.
Yeah, this is not going to be easy for this division. I mean, I said like 4 teams could eventually make the playoffs out of this division, and one of those teams is definitely Boston. I mean, you mentioned JD Martinez. I even forgot. I didn't mention him, but JD Martinez obviously powerhouse offensive stats. We've seen him do so much stuff for that Boston Red Sox team. He's always a threat when he's at the plate, and now they have Trevor Story, who can be a bigger threat at the plate, along with Bogaerts and Devers, who is a dark horse for MVP. So yeah, it's crazy to think that potentially one team from this division, 4 out of 5, can potentially miss the playoffs. But we move on to my next team. Let's go into Tampa. Let's see what the Rays are doing. Obviously, Rays, they won the division last year, I believe. Yes, they won the division last year, beating
the wins even last year. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they defeated the Yankees in the last day. No, wait, or was it?
No,
I think it was
They won pretty handily. And the Red Sox
That's
and Yankees had 92 wins, and they had 100, so they won pretty
That's
easily.
right. That's right. I forgot it didn't come down to the last week, but they were playing each other that last weekend. But
Yeah.
another 100-win season for the Rays. Obviously, we highlight pretty much the outfield with this team with Arozarena, Kiermaier, Meadows, but he's obviously injured right now, so that's something to take note of. And then the infield is where the future is with Wander Franco, pretty much known as the most exciting shortstop in the game right now. In terms of rookies who can make a big name on the big stage. The thing about this Tampa Bay team that I really like is just how well rounded this team is. You don't really imagine, but you see Tampa Bay, and they've been making the playoffs consistently for the past like 3 to 4 seasons, and people have been saying, okay, is what the oh god, these lights are flickering, but you always look at Tampa Bay and you see the roster. There's no big names like the Yankees. There's no like really names that stand out, but they are always making a deep run within the playoffs. And it just shows you that this Tampa Bay team, can actually make things happen. Obviously, they have Yandy Diaz as well at first base, pretty much one of their bigger stars. They have Brandon Lowe at second, who's one of their bigger stars as well. So obviously, I do love Tampa Bay. I think I love more like their bullpen and the rotation. I'm still not a fan of how they pulled Blake Snell in that World Series against the Dodgers in the 6th inning. Obviously, but Kevin Cash has done to this team, he's just been slowly kind of dominating the AL East for like the past couple years. I have this team, maybe north of 90 wins. I'd say maybe like 94, 95. I can see this team definitely winning, around 90 to 95 games on the season. One of the bigger things for them is definitely going to be the development of Wander Franco. Is he going to be that really good guy, that top prospect that Tampa Bay really hoped for? We saw a glimpse of it as he entered last season, but it was kind of near the tail end. It was kind of a weird, but now he gets a full 162. I'm excited to see what he does for that program. And obviously, we forgot to mention, but they got Kluber, and that's a big acquisition for that, for that rotation as well. Obviously, Kluber has not had, the greatest success after he left Cleveland, but he had a little stint in New York, but now he's in Tampa Bay. So I kind of like what Tampa Bay is doing. I see him definitely winning 90 to 95 games on the season.
Yeah, and you mentioned their like some of the runs they've made in recent years, and what makes it even more crazy is that they've had those runs in recent years, and yet still two of their best players are rookies last year. So they have that kind of combination of youth and still veteran that have been there, in these recent runs. But the two guys I'm kind of looking at were rookies last year. One mentioned Wander Franco. He had 288 last year, 7 home runs in the 70 games he played in. I think he came in like mid-season, I want to say, kind of last year, so the second half of the year. And then I feel like I don't know, this might be a hot take or whatever you want to say, but I think he might be a dark horse for AL Cy Young is Shane McClanahan, who's a rookie last year for them. In 25 game starts last year, he had a 3.43 ERA, 10-6 record. And he's already named their opening day starter. So I think he's going to take a step forward as well this year. He's someone I'm targeting in every fantasy baseball draft, but that's for another day. But yeah, those two guys, they were both rookies last year that played well when their name was called. And I think that both of them should take a step forward this year. So yeah, Wander Franco, Shane McClanahan are two of the guys I'm kind of looking at with Tampa Bay this year.
Yeah, I even forgot to mention McClanahan. I mean, we saw the little bit of prosperous and just what's the word I'm looking for? Hope, glimmer of hope that we saw last year with him. But obviously, you mentioned that the Rays have already named him the opening day starter, and if he pitches the way that he's supposed to, I think he can be an also dark horse for Cy Young for the AL. You mentioned it. His stats just proven for himself, and with Wander Franco, obviously, I believe he could be one of the better shortstops in the American League, after only coming up here for about 70-ish games, had a pretty decent stat, 288. That's pretty good for only 70 games. So I think he'll blossom more in a full 162. So we'll see what he can do this season. And here we go. The other two teams in this crazy division. Let's go off with that team in New York. The Yankees. This team seems like they are pretty much the Dodgers of the East. This team always just gets more people. We can name every single person that is on that roster because of just how deep that roster goes. They just traded for Josh Donaldson. They have him at third base now. They traded for Kiner Falefa. He's at short. Obviously, they still have Gleyber Torres at second, and then at first it is what's his name?
Rizzo.
Yeah, Rizzo. I forgot. Yes, another All-Star. And then you just see that outfield. You see Joey Gallo. You see Aaron Judge. You see obviously DH the Giancarlo Stanton. This team just keeps getting better and better. And don't even start without the rotation. I mean, obviously they have one of the best pitchers without Spider Track. That's gonna anger some Yankee fans right there. But Garrett Cole, one of the best pitchers in baseball. They have Tyon. They did lose Kluber, but they still have Sevy and they still have a deep rotation. This team, the thing about the Yankees, they've always been linked to at least World Series hopes for at least since like 2016. And every year it's always something goes wrong or something happens where they just don't make it. And I'm sorry, this is going to be a hot take and it's going to anger some Yankee fans, but I don't care because I hate the Yankees. The Yankees are turning into the Cowboys of the MLB right now. They have all this talent, right? All these big names and can't get it done. Now, obviously, with some cheating scandalous issues going on down in Houston, that was a big red flag as to why they didn't make it. But still, last year and 2021 were great seasons for them. And still, obviously, last year, AL wild card, that game was crazy. Stanton almost hit a homer, but it was off the green monster. I think this team could definitely win over 90. I can see this team winning 90 to 95 in that range. I think more near 95 just because of what this team produces. They have a full roster of all-stars. And I think this team is just getting, I think this is the final year they're going to fully invest in this. We're going all in or in or out. So I believe Yankees are definitely going to be near the top of the division once again.
Yeah, with Garrett Cole, second in Cy Young last year, but you mentioned the sticky stuff. The first half of the year, he was like the leading Cy Young candidate by far, and umpires started checking for the stuff on the hands, and then after that, his ERA bumped quite a bit, and it capped off his season capped off getting shelled. He went, I think, just 2 innings in that wild card game against Boston. Gave up a handful of runs. I don't remember exactly what it was, but a handful of runs. I'm kind of looking for, so we'll see how he bounces back in that spotlight of New York. Obviously, always the pressures on that team to win, and they haven't been able to win to the point of getting to the World Series in quite some time. You mentioned Luis Severino, who I'm kind of looking forward to seeing. He had Tommy John surgery, so he missed most of last year, but he kind of came out of the bullpen late in the year. And as far as I know, he should be good to start this season. And, one of the young, promising kind of pitchers in the league. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how he bounces back as a full-time starter this year. The Josh Johnson trade, we'll see how he takes advantage of that short porch in right field in Yankee Stadium. He should fit in just fine in that lineup. And then with Judge and Stan, it just comes down to them staying healthy, really. I mean, they have I guess like Gallo to a lesser extent, but more so Judge and Stan with injuries, and staying healthy has kind of been their biggest downfall in kind of recent years. But I mean, yeah, if they stay healthy, they're gonna of course be a dangerous team as they are every year in the regular season. If they can make a run to the World Series, if they definitely have the talent to do so. But it seems like just every year, it seems like something goes wrong. Arlis Chapman, their closer, seems to kind of have some issues at times. So we'll see if he can stay steady the whole year or if he has some ups and downs. But yeah, I mean, obviously their over-under is 91.5, so they're right in that 90 to 95 range. Yeah, it should be a fun year.
Yeah, definitely. Yankees definitely do have the pieces to win the AL East again. If it's all depending if they stay healthy, a lot of their big struggles that a lot of people forget about is their bullpen. Well, obviously, they were known for blowing plenty of leads last year, so It'll come down to that bullpen. That bullpen efficiency. Is it really gonna transpire in this season, or is it going to be a lot of improvement coming out of that bullpen? We'll see. But the final team out of the AL East, pretty much more one of the more exciting teams is the Toronto Blue Jays. Obviously, one of the big acquisitions traded for Matt Chapman. They obviously bring back Barrios. They signed Kikuchi in the offseason. Their first baseman, Vladdy, obviously known as one of the candidates for AL MVP, one of the favorites coming into the season. We saw what he did last year. He finished second. That man was just raking and raking and raking like he didn't have any, like life didn't depend on it. That man just hit homers for the hell of it. And then you just see the full lineup to Toronto, and they're still trying to chase after Jose Ramirez. So we forget about that. They're trying to get Jose Ramirez. They already have Matt Chapman. They have Biggio. They have oh my God, what's his name? Teoscar Hernandez. They have George Springer. They have just this full lineup. Yeah, they have Bo Bichetti, one of the more exciting shortstops in baseball. You see that infield, and it's just absolutely crazy. And then you just see the full roster of Toronto, and you just get excited. And they're still going after acquisitions. They were even linked in the Freddie Freeman sweepstakes. So this team was just trying. They are going all in. And I think Toronto was one of those teams last year who just missed it, but I think should be going all in right now. Obviously, they have one of the more kind of fittable lineups with Teoscar Hernandez, Springer, Biggio, Bichetti. You have one of the more exciting players in Vladdy Guerrero Jr. They bring in Chapman. This team, and obviously you see the rotation. They have Barrios still. They did lose Robbie Ray. Sorry, not sorry. But they still have. We gave him Kikuchi. You can have him. We were trying to get rid of him anyway. But you see this bullpen, very formidable. I think this team could win the division. I think they're near 100-win season for this team. It looks like they're trying to go all in at the right time, and I think this team is definitely going to be one of the harder teams to beat in the AL East this year.
Yeah, I mean, Vegas has them winning the division there. Over-under is the highest out of all these teams at 92.5. It's just one game up on the Yankees and 3 games up on Tampa Bay. But they have 4 teams that are at least 85.5 over-under win total. So that kind of shows you how kind of wide open this division is and how good it is. Kikuchi, they brought in this offseason. He was an all-star last year, first half of the year. His ERA was like 2.5, like super, super good. In the second half of the year, he just completely flopped. He even got benched late in the season by the Mariners. And then now in spring training, he's pitching 3 games with the ERA 6.48. So he hasn't really hasn't gotten off to a good start in spring. But I mean, he's their number 5 starter right now, so they're not like heavily reliant on him. But I mean, if he can even get to like half of his numbers last year overall, then he could be probably one of the best number 5 starters in the league. But based on his performance in spring training, it's not really trending in that direction. You mentioned Vlad Guerrero Jr., one of the most exciting players in the league, 48 home runs last year. But not just that, he hit 311 too. So he has the power and still consistent as a hitter. Matt Chapman, they brought him from Oakland. He only hit 210 last year. He hasn't hit over 250 since 2018, but he still hit 27 home runs. So he still has that power. And with the rest of their lineup, that it is, they don't really need him to hit for average. I don't think they have a lot of guys that hit for average. So if he can just if he can stay in that 25 to 30 home run range, and that's all they really need from him, I assume he'll kind of hit kind of more late in their lineup, like 6, 7, 8 in that range. But yeah, definitely one of the more exciting teams, and not just the division of AL, but the entire MLB in Toronto, and should be exciting.
So I pretty much kind of revealed my order. I have Toronto at the 1 in this division, and then I have New York followed by Tampa Bay, and then Boston. It's going to be close between those 3, and then I have the Orioles sitting at dead last in the AL East. Is that kind of the same what you have?
So I think I agree with the Orioles at 5 and then Boston at 4, I think. But that's not like a knock on Boston. They definitely can compete in that top 1 to 3. I'm leaning. I agree with Toronto at 1. 2 and 3 at the Racing Yankees is super tough. I mean, the whole division is super tough, like we've been saying. But I'm kind of leaning towards Toronto. I'm kind of leaning towards the same as you. But I do think the biggest factor will be the Yankees bullpen, like you mentioned earlier. If they can kind of rebound as a unit and Severino can get back to his old self before Tommy John, I mean, Yankees could win the division. Of course, we mentioned multiple times that they could win the division. But in the end, I think I'll agree with you in Toronto, Yankees, Rays, Red Sox, Orioles in that order.
Yeah, you can make a case for any top one of those four teams, Toronto, New York, Tampa Bay, and Boston. You can make a case for any one of those four teams to win this division. But I think it's going to be a very, very tight race between 2, 3, 4, potentially even whoever finishes first in that AL East. I think it's going to be a great race for the AL East. I think it's going to be one of the more competitive divisions, and just in terms of all the talent that's in that division. But now we're going to move on to a more, kind of top-heavy division in the AL Central. Let's just start with the Royals. The Royals, obviously, they are kind of in that rebuild phase after their 2015 World Series. Obviously, they've built around Salvi. They do have Bobby Witt Jr., known as one of the bigger prospects coming into the MLB as well this season. They brought back Zach Greinke, so that's fun, I guess. But obviously, Kansas City, they are just in a rebuild phase. They're obviously more reliant on their prospects. Not really making too many big deals. I think they acquired Mike Minor in a trade. No, they tried Amir Garrett from the Reds for Mike Minor and some cash. So they made some, trades here and there, but more about the Royals. I think they're just more heavy dependent on their prospects coming up. So the Royals, I think they'll compete a little bit. I have them finishing, fourth in the division. Not too high, but at the same time, I guess it's something we'll have to see with Kansas City to kind of see how Bobby Witt does in his first full year.
Yeah, Witt was the guy I was going to kind of highlight first. The number 2 pick in 2019. He's hitting 400 in 11 spring training games. Obviously, spring training isn't MLB, so you can take that how you want, but he's clearly producing in spring how he's supposed to. Definitely, there's a lot of young prospects coming up this year that we'll talk about that are exciting, and Witt is one of the many of them. Greinke, you mentioned, former Royal. He's named opening day starter. Coming off of a kind of rough year rate over 4 with Houston last year. Interesting enough, which isn't a huge shocker, but still kind of interesting note that his 12-year gap between opening day starts for the Royals 12 years ago to this year is the largest single team gap of any kind. In that fashion, so it's kind of not shocking, but still it's kind of one of the things that you don't really think about, but it makes sense when you kind of hear it. But yeah, definitely a team that's really just looking towards the future right now. Their over/under win total is 74.5, so Vegas definitely thinks that they're gonna be in that lower 70 to maybe mid to high in that 70s range in general. They won 74 last year, so they're kind of right in that similar boat as last year. Hopefully, but now they'll get Bobby Witt up this year, so hopefully he can show some promise for them future-wise at shortstop. But yeah, overall, just kind of a team looking towards the future.
Yeah, definitely Kansas City, middle of the road team that is, kind of investing toward that future. You mentioned Bobby Witt, number 2 overall pick. Big aspirations for this year. I think they win about 70 to 75 games as well. Another team out of the AL Central that is looking toward the future, the Detroit Tigers. Detroit, obviously, they are really dependent on one guy, Spencer Torkelson. And obviously, he's kind of been that guy. I mean, he's been the number 1 overall draft pick, I believe, in the 2020 MLB draft by the Tigers out of ASU. A lot of promise for this guy. He can hit the ball well. Detroit is in that big rebuilding stage. Obviously, they did get Javi Baez. That was kind of one of the more interesting offseason acquisition. That was like one of the first ones, so people kind of forgot that Baez kind of went to the Tigers. But obviously, the Tigers were looking for that shortstop position. They were invested in Correa, but they had to settle for Baez. So they have their shortstop though. Javi Baez is now playing shortstop there. They have Torkelson. I kind of like the Tigers, but obviously they're kind of very invested in the future. I have this team probably finishing last in the AL Central. Probably around 60, higher 60, probably lower 70 wins as well. just mentioning the future. They got their shortstop. They have Torkelson, the future for that program, who's going to be the next probably Miguel Cabrera for that team. Just a guy that can hit the ball well. So yeah, I believe Detroit, is just looking for the future, but I guess they have some bright spots with Spencer Torkelson.
Yeah, I'm a bit bigger on the Tigers. I think that they can kind of hover around that 500 range, like 81 in that range, over under 77 and a half. And they won 77 last year. I think that they can kind of build on what they did last year a bit. You mentioned Torkelson, the number one overall pick in 2020 draft, is hitting just under 300 in spring training. So I think he has some promise. Another former number one pick I like is Casey Mize from 2018, who posted a 3.71 ERA last year in his first full season. So I kind of like him. And then Tariq Skubal, who kind of was a little bit up and down last year, but has some future promise. I like him. You mentioned Javi Baez. They still have Miguel Cabrera in that DH spot. Yeah, I don't know. I think they're definitely not like a contender or anything, but I think that they can kind of build off that 77 win season. I think, they're still a few years away in terms of like contending, I think. But I think that they could be a fun team to watch this year with all that young talent. Primarily that I'm looking at is Mize and Torkelson. Torkelson's another one, like I mentioned with Witt, another one of the young rookies making their debuts that made the open day roster, a number of them. And so, yeah, they should. I'm kind of excited for the Tigers this year just to watch. But again, I think they're going to kind of flirt around that 500 range.
Yeah, I definitely, I'm obviously a little low. I think lower end, I think more about 70 wins for them. Obviously, I think it's just more of, if they have like that expectation, just kind of being middle of the road. I think they could actually, maybe get near 80 wins as well. Another team that, it's kind of confusing to me is Minnesota. Obviously, Minnesota, they just had that big, weird acquisition in getting Carlos Correa. No one really saw Minnesota, actually trying to get him, but here we are. Carlos Correa is now a Minnesota Twin, but he does have, I think, a couple opt-outs in his contract. They still got Sano. They still have Byron Buxton. They obviously lost Josh Donaldson in that trade, but they just traded for Gary Sanchez and Urshela from the Yankees. So they have, they have a solid third baseman and a mediocre catcher. No offense to Yankee fans, but they probably hated him as well. So Minnesota, I think, I think they could be middle of the road. I think maybe about 75 to 80 wins is definitely in their realm for the Twins. One of the bigger questions is just kind of the rotation. I mean, obviously, the bigger loss of Jose Barrios in kind of in the middle of the season to Toronto was kind of a big one for them. So it's going to be interesting to see how Minnesota does with all these all these offseason moves. But I mean, they still have a pretty solid lineup with some formidable guys all around that franchise with Correa. I already mentioned. They still have Sano, Byron Buxton, one of the faster guys in the American League. Just all out can hit and we saw him hit the ball very well last year. So we know Byron Buxton can hit the ball well. So it just kind of comes the health of this Minnesota team. If they can fully stay healthy, they can maybe get around 500. So yeah, I think Minnesota is about middle of the rack and middle of the row in the AL Central.
Yeah, they were kind of one of the more disappointing teams last year with just 73 wins. I think a lot of people had kind of higher hopes for them. Byron Buxton's kind of one of the players I'm most excited to see this year. It's kind of always been health with him. That's been his biggest kind of downfall, so hopefully he can stay healthy. He hit 306 last year in just 61 games that he played in. But he's already, as of I think April 1st, he was hitting 11 and 27 in spring training, so he looks good in spring training. He kind of has that speed power combination that you kind of like to see, and then he's a pretty good hitter for contact as well. So kind of all around, and of course we know how fast he is in the outfield with defense, defensive wise. So yeah, you mentioned Carlos Correa, the 3-year deal, but he isn't opt out after the first and second year. So it's kind of strange how that worked out. But I guess that's the only way he signed Minnesota was to have those opt outs. It's kind of weird how Minnesota agreed to it, but I guess they're confident in their ability to form a team around them to where he'll want to stay. Their rotation is definitely the biggest question mark. They got Maeda, who's I think going to start the season on the 60-day DL or 60-day IL, I should say. I think they brought in Chris Archer this offseason, so that should be interesting. And then they got Sonny Gray, Dylan Bundy, so definitely some kind of up and down rotation guys that could kind of be their biggest downfall. But I'm kind of with you with them and kind of in near that 500 range in that range this year. They're over unders 81.5, so it's kind of right there.
Yeah, you mentioned that rotation. Obviously, you mentioned Maeda already on the IL, and then Sonny Gray, who's had some inconsistencies. Chris Archer, also very inconsistent. So I think they're about middle of the road as well, just depending on how that how that rotation plays out and the health of Byron Buxton. A new not a new team, but also another team that has a new name, the Cleveland Guardians, out of the American League Central. One of the bigger questions for me is definitely this team because of what they're going to do with Jose Ramirez. Obviously, now they are kind of keeping him, but obviously they've been in trade talks with Toronto, as I just so. Excuse me. I guess Cleveland still has Shane Bieber, obviously AL Cy Young, so we've seen what Shane Bieber can do. But in terms of what Cleveland built, I think they've let all that go. I mean, obviously they already traded Lindor. They're already talking about trading Ramirez. So I kind of feel like Cleveland is heading in the wrong direction, but I don't know what direction they're really heading into. So I can't really get a good read on Cleveland. That's why I don't know what to do with them. Like, are they gonna keep Ramirez? Are they gonna build around Bieber? Like, I don't know what Cleveland's doing, but I guess it's a new obviously new mascot, so I guess new identity, I guess. Yeah, Cleveland is kind of up in the air right now. They either could look to their prospects or try and trade for some assets, but right now they're kind of up in the air after multiple postseason appearances from the former Indians, now Guardians.
It was super funny. I saw a post on Twitter that was a picture of their welcome sign in their spring training facility, and you could tell they if you take the Guardians and the Indians, they both have the DN, the DINS, and what they did is they kept that DINS the same font, and they just added the GUAR in different font. You can tell it's a different
Cleveland.
font. The joke is that they just kind of chose the cheapest name that they could, so they didn't have to change their spring training stuff. But yeah, you mentioned Jose Ramirez. That's definitely the biggest question mark. It seems like at this point it seems like it's inevitable that they're going to trade him. It just seems like it might be maybe the trade deadline now instead of before the season. But assuming that they trade him, they're definitely not in a full rebuild, but they're not going to compete for the division with that. After moving Lindor, I think last year, it was, and then Jose Ramirez now. One of the players I'm kind of most interested to see this year is Zach Plesac. He was super solid as a rookie. He had an ERA at 3.81, which is solid for his rookie year, and then 2.28 in the shortened 2020 season. And he kind of seems to be trending in the right direction. But then last year, he kind of blew up. He kind of went the other way. His ERA is 4.67 last year, and so I'm curious to see if he can bounce back this year. You mentioned Shane Bieber is kind of their ace, but if they can get someone like Plesac behind him as that kind of 2-3 with Savali and Quantrill, the rotation could be solid. But yeah, their lineup isn't really looking too great, especially if they do trade Jose Ramirez, losing him and Lindor. There's definitely not too much to look forward to that I can see. They still got Franmil Reyes at DH, but they have some pieces, but definitely not one of the more exciting teams to look forward to as a neutral fan this season.
Yeah, Cleveland is in a weird rebuild, but not competitive to win a division kind of atmosphere right now in Cleveland. So it kind of you mentioned Zach Plesac. It kind of depends on if he can actually be that number 2 guy behind Bieber. You mentioned his first year, he had that low about 3.60 ERA, but then a boost up of 4.8. It kind of be interesting to see what he kind of produces this season. And then you mentioned Franmil Reyes, obviously DH, but other than that, not really any big notable bats after the Lindor trade, and now potentially the Jose Ramirez trade, which is going to happen inevitably at this point. So Cleveland, they're in a weird atmosphere in that program in Cleveland. But now the final team out of the AL Central, pretty much more one of the exciting teams in this division, is the Chicago White Sox. They're definitely in contention mode right now. Their prospects have come up to the big leagues. They are doing their best right now. They obviously just traded for AJ Pollock. We already talked about that. Instead of Luis Robert, they have Moncada at third. They have they just obviously one of the biggest losses was Carlos Rodon, but that's more of like a kind of a question mark for the Giants. Obviously, we'll get into that on Wednesday. But the thing with this team is they're obviously definitely in win now mode. Obviously, they have Jose Abreu, who has put up so many good numbers, and it's just kind of at the peak of his career as a first baseman. And this team has just built at the right time, and they're peaking at the right time. And now they've turned from aspiring contenders to actual World Series contenders. So I'm excited for this team. I definitely think this team is pretty much one of the heavy favorites to win the AL Central, probably without a shadow of a doubt. And I think can definitely make some noise within this playoff system. Obviously, they have one of the best closers in the baseball with Liam Hendricks. Just his energy changes the game on the mound. So I definitely see Chicago easily winning this division. And I definitely think it's going to be a good year for the White Sox coming out of the AL Central.
Yeah, they're definitely the heavy favorite. Their over-under is 91.5, and the next closest to the Twins at 81.5. So that's a 10-game difference. So they're definitely the heavy favorite. They have Lucas Giolito's kind of like headlines their rotation, but one of the other starters I'm kind of looking at is Dylan Cease. He had a 3.91 ERA last year, and it was kind of his first kind of full season as a starter. He kind of made his debut in 2019. He only had 14 starts, and he had 12 starts in the 2020 shortened year. But he kind of struggled those 2 years with a 5.79 ERA and 4.01. But he kind of took a step forward with a 3.91 ERA last year across 32 starts. And so I'm kind of looking to see if he can take another step forward this year. The rotation is pretty solid, even with losing Rodon. They still have Lance Lynn, who's injured, but he's a solid middle of the rotation. And you got Giolito, Cease, Keuchel, Lynn, and then Kopech kind of has depth when Lynn's healthy. We're going to see AJ Pollock kind of get a full-time starting role with the Dodgers. They had the depth to where they kind of moved him around where he wasn't an everyday player, but he should be an everyday player. For the White Sox, we talked about Luis Robert, I think last week. I think we did. So they got him. Of course, they got Jose Abreu, one of the best first basemen in the league. So yeah, they're kind of one of those examples of a team that really built their team from the ground up with the farm system and prospects, and they're kind of at that peak level right now. They're 91.5. Over-under is second in the AL, only behind Toronto. There's another there. I think it's the Yankees, and we'll get to another team later that is tied with them for second in terms of over-under for wins. And so, yeah, they're definitely the heavy favorite in the Central and one of the favorites to get out of the AL in the World Series.
Yeah, you mentioned that rotation for the White Sox. I think that's going to be one of the more heavier.
I also want to talk about how you mentioned Liam Hendricks, and then they signed Kendall Graveman. So even despite losing Craig Kimbrell, which is kind of for a reason because they didn't need him, they have one of the best kind of setup closer kind of duos with Graveman and Hendricks. So they not just have a solid rotation, but the bullpen as well.
Yeah, you mentioned just how deep that bullpen goes. They have a solid rotation. They've built that outfield. They've developed that infield with prospects. I believe this team is definitely going to easily win the AL Central, and then I definitely see potentially the Twins right behind them. I can see the Tigers, and then Cleveland, and then maybe Kansas City in that order, 1 through 5. Just because I don't know what Cleveland's doing, and then Kansas City, obviously they're building for the future. We mentioned the Tigers, and then the Twins. They can probably finish second, and then definitely Chicago. Just that's that. Those prospects and how they've built that organization for the rebuild. I think this is the year that the White Sox make it back to the postseason and actually have, some postseason aspirations to potentially make it to the World Series.
Yeah, so White Sox, Twins, Twins 2, Tigers 3, Guardians 4, and Royals 5. That's what you said, yeah?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm with you on that.
And finally, we're going to move into the final division, one of our favorite divisions to talk about, the AL West. Let's just start at the bottom. Oakland. They are full. We don't have to talk about Oakland. I saw this on TikTok. If you bought MLB The Show, you spent more money in the offseason than the Oakland Athletics did. That's mind-boggling to me. Like, the A's are just in full rebuild. 100% get rid of everybody. They got rid of Matt Olson. They just traded away Sean Manaea. They already got rid of Matt Chapman. Like, they're just getting rid of everybody. So, Oakland, if you're an Oakland A's fan, you may want to be looking 5 to 10 years down the road from now, because this team definitely is contender for last place in the American League. They are definitely full on rebuild. I think there's been links to them moving to a new location, potentially Portland or Vegas. I think they're in the mind of, okay, we're already going to be moving. Let's just get rid of all our best players and start fresh. So I think Oakland, it's not going to be pretty down there in the Bay. I see them finishing dead last. You know, they have all their prospects they have to look forward to, but you know, not many bright spots in Oakland right now. We've got Chris Bassett got traded as well. So Chris Bassett, Matt Chapman, Matt Olson, Sean Manaea, they were talking about Montez as well. All 4 of their best players have been traded. So it's not looking good for Oakland.
It's so funny because Sean Manaea was scheduled to pitch against the Padres in spring training, and he gets traded that same day, and set pitches for the Padres against the A's that same day. So it's kind of but yeah, I mean, there's really not much. I think at this point, with Montes, like Jose Ramirez, it'll probably get down to the trade deadline. There's no point in keeping him at this point. Kind of with their team, what the direction the team is headed. So, but I think Oakland might wait till the deadline to deal him in July, I believe it is. But yeah, I mean, you just look at, they had 86 wins last year, and now they're over under 68.5. So just 1 year later, they're over under drops like 17, 18 games from what they had last year. So that alone kind of says, where this team is headed. I mean, you kind of look at the depth chart. There's really not much to get excited about other than Montes, who's probably gonna get traded. Tony Kemp, was solid last year, 287, but not much. They have Ramon Laureano, who's going to be suspended for the first month to finish off his 80-game PED suspension from last year. Yeah, there's not much.
Sorry, Oakland fans. We're not, as Mariner fans, we're not trying to diss you or anything. We're just at a loss for words. Like, we just don't see any bright spots. So now we're going to move a team who has spent no money this offseason to a team who spent so much money I could not believe it. The Texas Rangers. Jesus Christ. How much money are they giving Corey Seager and Marcus Semien? They're giving them billions and billions of dollars just for playing infield. But I mean, definitely, that duo is definitely one of the better duos. I can say maybe one of the best middle infields in the American League. Obviously, you have Marcus Semien, one of the best second basemen in baseball right now. The Mariners were linked to him. Don't know why he went down to Texas, but obviously we know why, because he got paid. And speaking who got paid, the guy right next to him, Corey Seager, he got paid. So they definitely have the future middle infield sorted out in Texas with Corey Seager and Marcus Semien. They do have Adolis Garcia, some bright spots. Texas, they're in the rebuilding process right now, and now they got 2 big name acquisitions this offseason. I can see this team definitely finishing 4th in the division. Not too many bright spots, but definitely Corey Seager and Marcus Semien are definitely 2 big signings for this team as they look to go back to the postseason in maybe the next 5 to 10 years, depending on how the rebuild goes. But, we look at this team and we saw Texas, they were definitely, a last place team. Not everyone kind of ruled them out already, but then all of a sudden they make 2 big moves this offseason and people are kind of raising their eyebrows like, don't forget Texas is still there. So, obviously they spent a lot of money, but I think that investment's going to pay out in a little while, not exactly this year.
Yeah, I mean, their rotation's still super weak. They have the new stadium. I think they're going to sell a lot of tickets with Simeon and Seager, they're definitely going to be exciting offensively. But I still think pitching will be their biggest downfall in terms of kind of wins and losses. Obviously, I mean, there's not much else to say with Simeon and Seager, and they're, they might be the best middle infield in the entire league, arguably, or at least in that conversation. In his first full season last year, I saw from Adolis Garcia, 31 home runs. He's hitting 270 in spring, so it's if he can kind of have a solid average to go with that power, that could be big for Texas. But yeah, I mean, I think the rotation, their bullpen's kind of shaky too, so I think that's going to be their biggest downfall. They also brought in Mitch Garver from the Twins, I believe. I want to say he was with last year at catcher beyond the plate. So, I mean, yeah, offensively they should be solid and fun to watch. It's just that pitching staff that still needs some work in terms of winning games. But yeah, they should at least be exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see Corey Seager, Marcus Semien in that middle infield. But obviously that pitching rotation is very suspect, so that's something they'll have to invest into as they get closer and closer, to potentially making it back to the postseason. The third team I'm going to talk about is the Angels of Anaheim, Los Angeles Angels. Look, okay, this team has been getting a lot of praise as well on Twitter. There's two guys I want to talk to right now, Eric Long and Tom Abbott. They are the biggest Angels fans. They're talking about, Seattle's not winning the division. Oh, they're not winning the Angels. I'm like, okay. Shohei Ohtani is that dude. We saw that. Yes, we did. Mike Trout is that dude.
When he's on the field.
Do they still have Andrew Heaney? Yeah, please tell me they still have Andrew Heaney. Like, who is their starting rotation now? Like, obviously, please, let me know.
They signed Noah Syndergaard to a 1-year deal this offseason.
Oh yeah, that's right. They did sign Tor, but this man has been injury prone. But I mean, Tor is still Tor. I mean, he does what he does. No disrespect and they still have Raisel Iglesias, one of the better relief pitchers in the one of the better closers in the American League. But the thing with the Angels, and this happens every year, is a big injury. Last year was Mike Trout. I'm not gonna hope for any injuries, but I think something could happen this year again. The Angels have the offense, right? They still have Rendon, they still have Ohtani, they still have Trout, they still have Walsh. They have offensive weapons, but whenever something goes wrong with this Angels team, we always look to the bullpen. The Angels bullpen has had very, very suspect numbers as of recent, and I think it's going to haunt them once again. I think this team's finishing third. I think it's going to be close. I think they're about a 500 team. They were giving the Mariners a bunch of trouble at the end of the year, but I don't think this team is playoff ready yet. They do have big names on offense, obviously with two, pretty much obviously they have the reigning AL MVP, Ohtani, along with a man who has won multiple MVPs, Mike Trout. But I feel like this may be another year where wasted talent is just still there. I think if the Angels don't fix that bullpen, I think the Angels are stuck at third, and I don't see them moving up at all. And yes, the Angels have made some off-season moves, but the other two teams that we haven't talked about have also made some big moves, and I think it's going to be hard when you see those two teams competing pretty hard. I don't see the Angels fitting in that well.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say anything bad about Ohtani. He's arguably the most exciting player in the league. I mean, MLB created a whole rule just for him, basically, with the him being able to stay in the game as a hitter after leaving as a pitcher. So you can say nothing bad about him. He's hitting 304 in spring training with 3 home runs already. So he's picked up where he left off. I think he just hit a home run off Walker Buehler of the Dodgers a day or two ago. So with Trout, he played 36 games last year. So it's just, if he can stay healthy, we know he's an MVP candidate if he can stay healthy. We have that. And the rotation we mentioned, of course, Ohtani leads the way. And then, again, injuries with Syndergaard. If he can stay healthy, he could be a solid number 2. But, again, can he stay healthy? One of their more underrated starters last year that kind of came out of the nowhere to some extent is Patrick Sandoval. He had a 3.62 ERA in 14 starts. So if he can post even close to those numbers as a 3-starter, That could be big for the Angels starting rotation. They just released Justin Upton a day or two ago, and so that should lead to full-time roles for Joe Adell and Brandon Marsh. Besides Trout, next to Trout in the outfield and left field and right field. Odell was the number 10 pick in the 2017 MLB draft. He had 246 in 35 games last season, so we didn't see much of him last year, but he should see a full-time role this year, so we'll see what we get from him. But yeah, I mean, with Rendon, Trout, Ohtani, it's arguably one of the best trio of hitters, in the league, or at least in the AL. So yeah, like you said, I agree that it comes down to their bullpen, and then if guys like Sandoval and Syndergaard can step up in their starting rotation, that's what it comes down to. Because offensively, offensively, if they can stay healthy, they should be really good.
Yeah, we always talk about how offensively stacked the Angels are. They've made so many offensive acquisitions. Though obviously one of the bigger questions has always been their bullpen, and they have no more Andrew Heaney anymore, so no more question about their starting rotation. They have obviously Ohtani. They had that rule created just for him, so we have Ohtani as their probably their ace, and then they have Syndergaard and they have Sandoval. So if they have a solid 1-2-3 combo, I think they could make some noise in the AL West, but that bullpen is very suspicious, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest downfalls heading into this season. Before we talk about our team, we got to talk about that cheating team down in Houston. Mr. Bang on the Mr. Bang on the trash can, cameras in center field, the Houston Asterix. I mean, obviously one of their bigger losses with Carlos Correa, but they still obviously have Bregman and Altuve. Very formidable infielders that have been with the Asterix pretty much throughout their tenure. I'm going to keep calling them the Asterix because they don't deserve. I mean, if any Houston fans want to come at me, I don't care. I'll give you all the smoke. So obviously they still have Yordan Alvarez, one of the better DHs in baseball. Obviously Justin Verlander as their ace, but one of the bigger losses obviously is Carlos Correa, but this team, it seems like this team took a step back with just how they operate. I mean, a lot of speculation. They still won the division last year, and they still had a pretty decent run without the playoffs. But just coming up short against the Braves in the World Series last year. But I mean, they have a decent lineup. You can't tell them not. I mean, you can't tell them no. But they obviously lose Zach Greinke. And they lose Carlos Correa. Those are two big names for that program that they lost. But I mean, when you still have guys like Altuve and Gurriel and Bregman, and just how deep that that starting nine is, it just shows. And then obviously they have one of their prospects. I forgot his name. Who's just the Carlos Correa replacement at short.
Justin Pena.
Yeah, Pena, that's his name. Yeah, they're really high on him. He's
Jeremy, not Justin. Yeah, Pena.
Yeah, Jeremy Pena. A lot of people are high on him, and they feel like he's a very formidable and solid Carlos Correa replacement. So definitely, it's going to be Houston. Definitely contending once again for that division. They still have a solid rotation. They have a solid bullpen. It's pretty much just the same team, just a little bit of change, just a little bit of movement. No Carlos Correa, one of their bigger guys who've been with that program for a while. So it'll be interesting to see how Houston starts, obviously with a bunch of new faces and new places and stuff like that. But obviously this team still has the postseason experience and just the experience at the regular season to get their way to the win their way to the postseason. So I believe Houston will definitely be a contender in this division once again, just because of they've been running this division for the past 5 to 6 years, and I feel like with a new contender emerging, I feel like it's going to be close. But I think Houston will definitely be a lock for the playoffs, and if they make some big moves, potentially can have a deeper run with or without trash cans.
As far as them taking a step back, Vegas will agree with you. They won 95 last year, and their over-under is 91.5. So, slight step back. Verlander, you mentioned, he had Tommy John in October 2020, so he missed all last year. He's looked pretty good in spring training, so it seems like he should be good to go this year. He's not going to start opening day. I think it was Framber Valdez was named the opening day starter. But I mean, if they can get Verlander back, that would be huge for the rotation. Altuve, after his horrid 2020 shortened season where he hit I think it was 219, he bounced back last year at 278, 31 home runs. I mean, the loss of Correa is going to be big, but they still have a super solid lineup with Maldonado, Gurriel, Altuve, Bregman, Brantley, Kyle Tucker was solid last year, Alvarez, and then we'll see what they get from Pena. At shortstop, they lost Greinke in the rotation, but I mean he wasn't great last year, so I don't think that's a huge loss. They still have a solid bullpen led by Ryan Presley as the closer. And then, I mean, Valdez, I think Valdez and Marquette were the younger guys, and then they still got Odorizzi and then Verlander as that kind of top four. And then Luis Garcia as well, and I think McCullers is hurt, I believe, but they have him as well. So, I mean, they should still be a contender, of course, in the division, and then we'll see if they make some moves at the deadline. I feel like they might need to make some moves to be like World Series contenders, I would probably say. But, I mean, if they have a good first half, maybe they make some moves at the deadline and make those moves that they need to be the contender.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think if they want to be World Series contenders, I think they're going to have to make some serious moves here. In all seriousness, I think, obviously having Altuve and Bregman is solid. And obviously with Alvarez, and they still have Tucker, they have Reddick, they have Brantley, who's been solid for them. I think, they can obviously get it done. But I think if they need to take that next step, they're obviously going to need to trade for probably a big name in that division, or even, maybe purchase some extra equipment, wink, wink, for them to get some wins. But just kidding aside. And finally, the one team that we have not talked about in this division, the one that I've been waiting so long for, are Seattle Mariners. Ari, I'm going to just let you have the floor. I know you're excited as I am. You have the floor.
This has to be the most disrespectful over-under ever. They won 90 games last year, so say what you want about how they won that blah, blah, blah. Their over-under is 83.5 after winning 90 games last year. It's put the house on the over for that, Mariners. Put the house on it. We mentioned earlier, we got the news today, it's Monday, right? Yeah. Monday morning that Julio Rodriguez is making the open day roster. We all knew it, but knowing the Mariners' history, we still just wanted to get that certificates. We wanted to hear it ourselves before we assumed anything. I mean, you can say what you want about kind of how they, the fun differential, what they called it in Seattle. Say what you want in terms of how they won those 90 games last year, but when you look at all the offseason additions, you look at Adam Frazier, Eugenio Suarez, you're going to get Julio Rodriguez up this year who didn't play last year. You can bring in Jesse Winker, Robbie Ray, you get Matt Brash, who wasn't on the team last year. So you look at all those kind of either additions this offseason or young prospects who are going to play this year that weren't on the team last year. And that should more than make up for any kind of regression that they're going to have on those one-run games that they won last year. They also get Ken Giles back in the bullpen, although he recently suffered a setback, but it's only a finger, not like a shoulder, so hopefully it shouldn't be too long. They lost Casey Sadler for the year, which will be a pretty big loss, but they also brought in Sergio Romo, should be a good kind of veteran presence in that bullpen. He looked good in spring training. I saw him a couple of days ago. His beard looks good as well. But I mean, I feel like, and then, we still have Kyle Lewis, who's going to miss the first, maybe month of the season. But I mean, if you look at, hopefully Kellogg's take a step forward. I mean, I think it's pretty clear the biggest weakness is catcher, but I mean, even Luis Torrens was pretty good in the second half of last year. And so, I mean, you look at the lineup with Ty France at first, Adam Frazier at second, J.P. Crawford at short, Suarez at third, and then you got, this is going to be the biggest question mark is once Carlos is healthy, you have 3 outfield and a DH for 5 players. between Jared Kelenic, Julio Rodriguez, Mitch Haniger, Jesse Winker, and Kyle Lewis. You have those 5 guys for 4 spots. So that's going to be the biggest difference, I guess the biggest decision to make. But I mean, Kyle Lewis, I think, has had 3 surgeries on the same knee. So I mean, unfortunately, he's no lock to stay healthy. And it's always better to have that depth. It's better to have more depth than less depth at the end of the day. I think if all 5 of those guys are staying healthy and hitting well, then we could see the Mariners trade one of them at the deadline for another need, because you're not going to sit one of those 5 like every day. They're all too good to sit, and so that'll be something to keep an eye on. But you look at the rotation led by Robbie Ray, reigning AL Cy Young winner, and then you got Logan Gilbert, who should take a step forward this year. Marco Gonzalez and Chris Flexner, kind of the 2 kind of like steady, consistent guys in the middle that should be solid. And then you got the young gun and Matt Brash, who had an ERA of like 1.5 this spring. I saw him live. I think whenever he last pitched, like Friday, Saturday, one of those days, and he looked really good. And then they got George Kirby coming up, who's starting in the minors, but he'll be up, I would think, at some point this season. And then you got one of the better bullpens too. You got Paul Sewald and Diego Castillo leading the way for kind of save opportunities. Steckenrider was really good last year, and then you got another young guy in Andres Munoz, who throws 102. Misevich, again, the loss of Sadler is going to kind of suck for that kind of middle of the bullpen, but I think that they have enough depth to kind of overcome that. Hopefully Ken Giles doesn't miss too much time. Again, it's a finger, not shoulder, so I don't think it should be like season ending or anything. But after he missed last year due to, I think, Tommy John, obviously any setback isn't good. And yeah, I guess that's kind of my summary of the team. I'll leave it to you now.
All I'm gonna say: 90 wins, no Kyle Lewis, no Jesse Winker, no Eugenio Suarez, and they're saying we're at 84 wins. Like what are we doing here? Like what are we doing here? This team has built perfectly, with Matt Brash being the 5. He is one of our aces right now, coming up coming on probably now in the number 5 rotation. So great for him. Obviously, we still have guys like Emerson Hancock still down there as well. And we still have Noah Marte, who is one of our bigger names at shortstop down in Double-A. And I think he's moved up to Double-A and going to Modesto. But you see, obviously, the fun differential memes, but we have switched that now because we were so bad offensively. Now we have Jesse Winker and Eugenio Suarez, who are 2 very powerful hitters. Jesse Winker can absolutely obliterate right-handed pitchers. And obviously in the American League, there are definitely more right-handed pitchers than left-handed pitchers. And number 2, Eugenio Suarez, I think he can get 40 home runs this season. So I don't know why these clowns at Sportsbook are saying we're 84.5. I think that's ridiculous. I think whoever Matt Snyder is of CBS Sports, who has us going under 84.5, I think he's the biggest clown of them all, because he says this, and I quote, he says this, you ready for this? He says, quote, they won 90 games last season, and I'm going under 84.5. What kind of sense does that make? What kind of sense does that make? You saw this team with 90 wins, who had no postseason aspirations whatsoever, who lost Kyle Lewis for the majority of the year, right? We made some, and now heading into the season, the only thing we were looking forward to was the off-season acquisitions we made. Robbie Ray, Adam Frazier, Eugenio Suarez, Jesse Winker, Robbie Ray, I think I already mentioned it, AL Cy Young winner. Are we forgetting this man just won the AL Cy Young? Why are we getting under 84.5? I think that's ridiculous. Slam that over. I'll put my mortgage on that. We're getting over 90. I feel like this is the year the Mariners are going to compete for the division. It's going to be between the Mariners and the Houston Astros. I would love to see the Mariners win this division. Am I going to say that they are? Yes, but I think it's going to be closer than I think a lot of people think. I think it's going to be very close between Houston. I think it's going to be separated by 3 games. I think Houston could finish second. Obviously, Angels finish third, then Texas and Oakland. But all I'm going to say with this Mariners team is just wait for the offensive production to flow in, and then all these 84.5 nonsense will just shut up, and then they'll say, oh, this team is actually a playoff team. And we'll say, really? We told you so. We told you so. So I'm definitely...
We'll pull out these receipts at the end of the season.
Well, Matt Snyder, I'll hit you up on your email, okay? If read this article right here, okay? All you Mariner fans, read this article by Matt Snyder. I'm going to put it right here. This one right here. You see that name right there, Matt Snyder. Give him a call for me, all Mariner fans. We need to stand together and get this clown out of here. 84.5 wins. I'm going under. Please. This bullpen, obviously, the setback of Casey Sadler, but still, Romo is still there. We have a solid bullpen. We still have Diego Castillo in the second year. Very, very formidable closer. We still have a setup guy in Paul Sewald, one of the Mariner favorites, fan favorite for me. So, what else do we have to prove? What else? I am so tired of having to prove that the Mariners are going to be a playoff team. I'm just going to let them show it. We are going to let you guys watch how the Mariners do, and it starts Thursday against the Twins. I'm telling you right now, we're going to make we're going to make noise. And there's one name I'm forgetting. There's one name just got called up today. The number 3 prospect, potential AL Rookie of the Year, Julio Rodriguez. This man is hitting 419 in spring training. This man is raking. He hit an inside the park homer.
I was gonna say, and I was there this past weekend on Thursday alone, in that one game, he beat out an infield single. He stole a base. He threw out a runner at second, trying to stretch a single into a double from the warning track in center field, and he hit an inside the park home run. He's 6'3". He literally has like a 5-star tools at like literally everything: speed, power, defense. He has the size, like literally everything you want. He's been in the talks as a top 3, 4, 5, 2, whatever you want to call a prospect for a reason for a while. And we're seeing it in spring, firsthand. He has the confidence, the clear confidence that you want. And so your Seattle Mariners hoping they center fielder. We saw the lineup today. It might be kind of similar to the opening day lineup, leading off with Adam Frazier, number 1, Ty France 2, Jesse Winker 3, Mitch Haniger 4, Eugenio Suarez 5, Julio Rodriguez 6, Jared Kelenic 7, Tom Murphy 8, and JP Crawford 9. I kind of like because obviously Crawford led off last year, most of last year, but I like the balance because both Frazier and Crawford are similar players in terms of contact. I like having that 1 and 9, the top and the bottom, having that kind of contact with all the power in the middle.
84.5 wins. Please. We'll end it right there. 84.5 wins. My buds. Oh my goodness. All right, we will bring you another episode of AKP Sports Talk on Wednesday. We'll be recapping the Final Four, and instead of the AL, we'll give you our NL. We'll give you NL East, NL Central, and NL West division by division previews. Quick shout out. Obviously, a lot of people missed it last night, but South Carolina, they have won Women's March Madness. Great story for Dawn Staley, first Black head coach to win the tournament. So congratulations, South Carolina. Just wanted to say that quickly for all women sports supporters out there. And yeah, this has been AKP Sports Talk. We will see you guys Wednesday for the NL preview and the recap of the championship.